I have no more campaigns to run.
Senator, you're no Jack Kennedy.
Nobody in America that I know, at least not where I grew up, ever said to me as a kid in class, hey, Scott, good luck becoming dependent on the government someday.
Governor, there you go again.
One even said that efforts to guarantee fair pay reminded him of the Soviet Union.
Challenges for the next president is to restore some civility in our political process. But in the interim, it's ugly for sure.
I want to be president to help us build a future greater than our amazing past. And I will work with anyone to do it.
Whole binders full of women.
Is it right for me? Is it right for my family? And is it right for the country? If I answer all three of those yes, I'll run.
This campaign is not about Bernie Sanders. It's not about Hillary Clinton. It is not about Jeb Bush or anyone else. This campaign is about the needs of the American people.
Plays for the presidency.
We are looking at the plays today. Alan Kelly is with us in studio, CEO, founder of Playmaker Systems, author of The Elements of Influence. He tweets at Playmaker Alan, which is ALAN, and is fresh-faced and ready to roll today.
Fresh as a daisy.
As a daisy. Very good.
Morning, Tim.
Good morning, sir. I would like to, we got last night to what I think a lot of people are thinking might be an inflection point in the debates. It was the third Republican debate. It was an important moment. And it was an important moment for a couple of different reasons, because we're starting to see winnowing of the field. We saw Scott Walker out. We've seen Rick Perry out. They were on the main stage. I don't think Rick Perry made it to the main stage this time, but certainly Scott Walker did.
Walker invited everyone to be out.
He did.
Please join me in my misery. Please, please, please.
He did. The question, though, is what's interesting is the question going into last night's debate is whether or not there were going to be attacks. And Ben Carson has been pretty much stepping away from that. He won't take the invite. He won't take the bait, if you will. You've been writing about this recently, about going negative and staying positive. And it seems to me this is the point where all of these candidates are trying to decide, how am I going to get noticed? How am I going to make some traction? And if I need to be negative, Donald Trump has I think, honed this to a fine art. But the other candidates are starting to figure it out. Jeb Bush tried last night. He went after Marco Rubio on his voting record, and he wasn't in the Senate. And Marco Rubio just came back straight at him and said, you're only doing this because you're running against me and you want the same job as I do, and that's the only reason you're bringing it up. You didn't bring it up when it happened with these guys before, and he said the same thing about the media. Donald Trump did his usual attack on a couple of different people. John Kasich went a little bit after Donald Trump and Ben Carson for their seemingly mindless policies. They just didn't seem to make a lot of sense. But Ben Carson kept playing it back. So when do you attack? Why don't you attack? Put it in the context of what we discuss each week.
The context I've written about it on my blog about going negative and staying positive has to do with my private sector clients who are usually fear-struck at going negative. And it actually has more to do with the fact that they don't have the competence to get into the real-time knife fights of real markets. And they've been told for so many years, just take the high road. The reputation specialists have said basically just make them like you, so that it's an extremely cautious environment. And how this bridges over into politics and the elections in particular maybe has a lot to do with Bernie Sanders. We can get to the Republicans, but Sanders has imposed upon himself the requirement not to, quote, go negative. And yet now that Hillary is off of Benghazi and the hearings, and off of the debate where he himself said no more emails, she is taking off. Well, when you see in any marketplace, when you see that your numbers are rising maybe, but an opponent's are rising even faster, you have no choice but to go after those numbers or that opponent. You have no choice but to, quote, be competitive. So Bernie's in a real pickle. He's got to figure out how to run plays without contradicting his authentic, nice guy, image. And generally it's thought, well, you can't do it. You can't be negative and yet be positive. I disagree. This is what the system I have developed tends to show very nicely, is that there, in fact, if you go to it, it's at playmakersystems.com, that you can see on the table that there are not one or two, ways to attack. It's not binary. In other words, there are 24. There are 24 ways in which to influence, from the very subtle ping that we always talk about, right, to the crazy Ivan.
Use the scalpel, not the blunderbuss.
That's right. There are many ways to skin the cat. There are many ways to make an argument. And there are three in particular that seem to be working for Bernie and also work for corporations and businesses. They are the fiat, which is that expression of just straight information. There is a play called the ping, where you're just simply suggesting rather than saying it outright. There's a play called the mirror, which is kind of what I think of as like the nice guy's call out. When you're saying, well, Senator, in 1962, well, you wrote and you did the following things, where you sort of hold up a mirror to them and their record. Well, there's three three plays that you can run without, in fact, having to revert to fairly divisive influence strategies like the red herrings, or baits, or jams, or call-outs, or things like that, which are fairly regressive and clearly would reflect badly upon the player if they used them.
There's something that Bernie Sanders was using when he was campaigning in Iowa. Actually, it was the speech at the Jefferson-Jackson dinner, and a couple of different things he said. These are all part of the speech. Give a listen to this.
The Trans-Pacific Partnership. That agreement is not now, nor has it ever been, the gold standard of trade agreements.
Defense of Marriage Act.
Some are trying to rewrite history by saying they voted for one anti-gay law to stop something worse. That's not the case.
And he also talked about the war in Iraq.
I listened carefully to what Bush and Cheney and Rumsfeld had to say, and I said, no, they're not telling the truth.
That would be high engagement, Alan, if he were to use the name of Hillary Clinton. He never did. So is it still a call-out?
You could say it's a veiled call-out. I think I might be more inclined to say that it's a ping. He's saying, look, I did this, I did that. And the context, though, is so rich that what we know he's really saying is that I did this and Hillary didn't. I took a stand at this early date. Hillary waffled and fretted and blah, 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 and only recently has come to support, let's say, the Keystone XL pipeline, for instance.
Before we leave the Democrats, I want to bring up a memo that went out last night. And, I'm on the mailing list, so I get it. It's from Robbie Mook, who's with the campaign. And he says, friend, in an interview published today, Bernie Sanders' top aide said that if we criticize his candidate, he'll let us get run over by a Mack truck. We all know that campaigns are stressful and things can get heated, but this kind of rhetoric comes as a real surprise to me, especially from a candidate who claims to be different and says he won't go negative. And then they're asking for money, give $1 to help. So they're fundraising off Bernie Sanders going negative, and it was, of course, his campaign aide. So what kind of response is that?
This is Robbie Mook, who is with...
He's the official, he's with the Clinton campaign.
Right. Well, it's sort of mock shock, isn't it?
Yeah. You need to have a special category, by the way, for fundraisers, because we're seeing it all come out for this.
Well, fundraisers are surrogates, and there are three different kinds of surrogates. There's partners, proxies, and there's plans. And Mook is acting out, the agenda of the Clinton machine on their behalf, and so you could say he's a proxy because he receives in-kind benefits or real benefits to do their bidding. I guess you could say that the play he's running is, in fact, a veiled call-out and trying to show that Bernie is going negative cleverly. And, in fact, he's probably right. It's just that it's not overt. It's just that it's not discernibly rude, as in, stupid style Donald Trump. So, I think it's a good play, but I don't think it'll work because I think Bernie has chosen influence strategies that are sort of behind that are within the bounds of propriety, or at least seeming to be.
I do want to get to one particular call out. We heard it last night. We've played this, but this is a little bit. There was a question asked, and then Ted Cruz comes on, and after the question is over, he says, look, I want to get to this particular part of the equation here. This is Carl Quintanilla from CNBC, and then Ted Cruz kind of takes this as an opportunity to just go off on the media.
Let me say something at the outset. The questions that have been asked so far in this debate illustrate why the American people don't trust the media. This is not a cage match. And you look at the questions. Donald Trump, are you a comic book villain? Ben Carson, can you do math? John Kasich, will you insult two people over here? Marco Rubio, why don't you resign? Jeb Bush, why have your numbers fallen? How about talking about the substantive issues people care about?
So that is not subtle. I would say, Alan Kelly.
It was time for somebody to do that. We've talked about this over and over through almost every debate. It's very clear that the plays that are being run, the most prominent plays are being run, are in fact by the journalists. They're not using that play called a fiat, just the expression of information. They in fact are actively baiting the participants to cross a line that they really would rather not cross.
Well, the first question, and I try not to get into media criticism here because it's not my job, but the first question seemed a bit odd. It was, "Dear Donald Trump, here you've said this is this. Is this a cartoon campaign?" I mean, really? That's sort of setting, that's what you agree with? That's what you believe as you're asking that question? It just seems a bit odd way to start.
Yeah. So it was too many times that had happened. It was also a relatively weaker player, CNBC, that they could brush back on. And I don't think it's any accident that it was Ted Cruz that did this. He is by far the best rhetorician of any of the pack, R or D. He is very, very good at what he does. I think back on the moment we dissected this, when the little girl said in front of him spontaneously, "The world's on fire,"
right?
And he beautifully pivoted to that. He could have gotten himself in, so it could have been campaign ending, but he used that reference to bridge to another topic that he was ready to do. He is really quick, and what he in fact was doing, I think, was, and we've talked just, he was a veiled call out, or maybe it was a play we called a label, because he took advantage of the overt baiting machine of his interrogators to then run a series of pithy quotes about all of his competitors. Jeb Bush will resign, and do you do this, blah, 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 all down the line. He just went bam, 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 and he shot every one of his competitors.
As we wrap up here, I would like to once again make a pitch for having audience-free debates, because they make for great television, but when you bring them in, it means that they are part of the play. They are, when he was doing that, he was going to get the applause, and he kind of knew it. He could still attack, but it had more effect because he had the reaffirmation of those who were in attendance. And that sometimes becomes a part of the dynamic, which is, I guess, nice for entertainment, but for an information forum, I don't know that it really serves the purpose.
This is the age of entertainment. There's too much information.
Yeah.
We want too much of it. We get too bored. We demand to be entertained in just simply the news that we know that we should consume. And there's so many choices, and we don't have enough time. And that is part and parcel, and it is ruinous to the process of understanding who our candidates are, for sure.
Alan Kelly, thank you. You're not ruinous at all.
Oh, thanks, and I'm awake.
The non-ruinous Alan Kelly with us here this morning. Thank you, as always. Alan, CEO, founder, Playmaker Systems. The Elements of Influence, and, of course, what we were just talking about with the blogs, we'll link it on our Facebook page, facebook.com/POTUSPolitics. You can tweet at us or tweet at Alan. He is at Playmaker Alan, Playmaker ALAN.